Welcome, everybody. Here we go. We've got a big one today, folks. So we'll give everybody 30 seconds to a minute before we say hello, introduce ourselves, and talk some quick housekeeping stuff before we dive in, because we got a super important topic. If you're financial aid and scholarship geeks like me and Peggy, maybe even a fun topic. We like to talk about this stuff every day. But curious, we always like to find out where you're at in the country. Just write in what city, what state, where's everybody checking in from, and then also it's fun for us to hear. Are you a student, a parent? Is it both of you sitting here?
There we go. Alabama. Nice.
We got all time zones covered.
Yeah, we're trying to hit every state in the country. I think the only one we haven't hit is Wyoming so far.
Wyoming, that's it. We need some Wyoming representation here. And so see mostly parents, but yeah, we're all over the place. It's usually Peggy's representing her roots out there, or not your roots, Peg.
My roots are in New Jersey, but I live outside of Seattle. So,
and generally speaking, I'm in the Boston area. We're reporting live from Charlotte, North Carolina today. So I won't bore you with the details, but we're in Charlotte today.
In an airport.
We got the business.
We always make it happen in CAP. Nothing gets in our way when we have a presentation.
We almost brought in a substitute teacher, but I couldn't resist. We had to figure out a way to make it happen today. So, okay,
all
awesome.
Right, well, thanks for like couple house. Okay, so I'll already answer the first question. Yes, we are recording this, and you will get the recording. So don't worry about that. If you want your partner, or kids, or whatever to listen, we will do that. And then during the presentation, we love questions. That's why we're co-presenting. Put them in the Q&A, though. We might tell you to put something in the chat. Go ahead and do that. But in general, please put your questions in the Q&A. And if people forget, we'll remind you. Just because it's one place to look and it's anonymous. So if you want to ask something that you want to be anonymous, you can. So with no further ado, you want to kick it off and intro yourself, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to do our very best here, right? Like Peg said, with Q&A, we're not going to be able to get to every question. It's just, we're going to get hundreds of questions and we'll do our absolute best. But I promise we're not going to leave anybody hanging. We will talk about when we end today. If you have more questions, if you want to meet with us on a more individual capacity, what does that look like? What do we do here? And as you will find out, do stick around to the end, because we always reward those that hang out live with us. Okay, we always take care of our live attendees that kind of stick it through with us over the next hour. So sit tight on that. If we don't get to your questions today, I promise we will. We're not going to leave you hanging. So my name is Matt Carpenter. I'm one of the founders at College Aid Pro. I've been doing this. Class 2024 is the 19th class that I've guided through this process. So literally I've been through this thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. Probably it is all that I know how to do professionally. This is the only thing I've ever done ever since I've graduated from college myself. Coming up on 20 years ago here now, right? And I got involved with this because of my own experience, because of going through this with my parents that didn't know what the hell they were doing. No knock on them. It's incredibly confusing. It's incredibly overwhelming. They were just two hardworking people that couldn't dedicate the time or didn't have the expertise to figure out the right way to navigate this process. And then again, kind of made some similar mistakes with my younger sister and then my younger brother. So that's kind of my origin story of I had this aha moment, like there has to be a better way to navigate this process and have it not be so overwhelming and stressful, and avoid these mistakes that end up making it so much more expensive than maybe it needs to be. And so it's incredibly rewarding work, right? Because it, as intimidating as this is, it's such an awesome thing, right? We're sending our kids to college and they've done their best efforts, and we're trying to make it happen as parents. So I love being able to help guide families through this process. And so that's why we built a technology and a team that does exactly that. And yeah, and I'm incredibly grateful to do it with other folks. Peggy specifically. Peggy, I like to call the fairy godmother of financial aid, because she's the best of the best. And in addition, she's been through this with her own kids, with twins. So Peggy, I'll let you say hi quick.
Yeah, so my background is in, financial advising and financial planning. And as Matt said, I have twins, boy and a girl. And when they hit high school, kind of did this deep dive, like probably a bunch of you have done, into like, okay, I've saved for college, but how does this all work? And I was blown away at how much more complicated it was than when I was a kid. And so I kind of had this aha moment, shifted a little bit in my career, and started my own business back in 2013, 2014. And then got to know the CAP guys, partnered with them, beta tested the software that you're going to see today, and then joined the team in 2021. It was just good timing for a whole bunch of reasons I won't bore you with. And so now I'm the director of education at CAP. But this is what gets me out of bed. And as Matt said, I mean, I get it, and I have a financial background. I know this stuff inside and out, and I get it on an emotional level too, because I've been through it. So you will all get through it. Doesn't have to be as stressful as it is for a lot of families, and that's a big part of what we try and do, is alleviate that stress by giving you knowledge. And there's one twin. It's not double the stress. That's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to help you to know it's not double the stress. All right, so let me share my screen here and let's kick this off. Okay, let me move all my Zoom stuff out of the way. Okay, so here we go. So College Aid Pro, I'm sure Matt said that. This is literally our admission to end the student debt crisis by empowering you to shop smarter for college. And this is one of the ways we do it. We're educating you. So the more you know about this, or you get guidance from us, the better off you are, because then you can go on tours and ask the right questions and kind of cut through some of the marketing that these colleges are really good at doing, right? So you want to find out what's going to be the best and most affordable school for you. So there we are. All right, so everybody should have received an email this morning encouraging you to set up your free MyCap account. So if you did, great. I hope you have that open over on the side, because we're going to talk about in 1 minute. I'm going to talk to you about something called a student aid index. So when I'm educating you about that, you can actually look at your unique family situation and see what we call, for short, your SAIs, which is what a whole bunch of free money revolves around. So I'm going to get into that in a minute. So if you haven't set it up, Matt's going to put that link in the chat. Go ahead and click on that. It's a very quick process. You just get started for free, get in there. There's a few onboarding questions, and then you'll be on your dashboard. So strongly recommend that you do that. That's kind of your first big step in this process to start understanding your family and where you fit. So go ahead and take care of that. So now let's talk about financial aid in general. Like, how does this work, right? I'm here to tell you, and Matt as well, that all of these colleges are discounting. So there's this what is called cost of attendance, or sticker price, whatever you want to call it. It's the full cost of the school: tuition, fees, room and board, books, travel, all that fun stuff. But all the colleges are discounting off that price. It's just a matter of how they do it. And so some families can get good discounts in one way and some families in another way. And so that's the whole thing of you being able to understand that. So how are they doing this? Well, they're doing it in one of three ways. So if you look on the far left, colleges are offering what we call need-based grants. So as the name hints, this is money, their endowment money. This is free money if it's the institutional grants, that basically they are figuring out that you have financial need. And I'm going to talk about in a minute how they do that. And then they're basically starting that discounting process by giving you some of their endowment money. The federal government does it in the form of Pell Grants and FSEOG, and states give out grants. So those are the main buckets to get these grants. The second bucket, the middle bucket here on my slide, is merit-based scholarships. So this is the flip side. It's not based on financial need. So Bill Gates's kids can get merit scholarships. And it's usually based on grades and test scores, but it can be talent, it can be sports, it can be your child's an awesome violin player, whatever it happens to be. Some of the colleges are very, very generous with merit scholarships. And when I say very generous, like there's colleges that have $30,000 a year merit award. So that's $120,000 discount. So you want to be able to identify these schools to see if your child is eligible for these, right? I already answered one question about scholarships and deadlines and how do you apply for them. The last bucket is what we call self-help. So this is student loans and this is work study. Work study is a job, right? So your child works, the government pays part of the wage. They're going and working wherever they're working, in the library or with a professor, whatever it is. And loans, obviously, we know what loans are, right? They have to be repaid. So that can be part of your funding strategy. That's not a bad thing if it's within reason, but it's not free money. So those are the ways that this sticker price is going to be discounted. So let's talk about the need-based aid. If you set up your free MyCap account, as I'm talking about this, glance over there, right? So you are going, if you're, we didn't ask what class your child is, but if you're a class of 2024 parent, in about a month, one of the forms is going to go live. And in December, the second form is going to go live. You're submitting those forms so that what's called a student aid index is calculated. And basically what this is what the colleges and the government think you can pay for 1 year. 1 year, not 4 years when that gets calculated. So you submit those forms, they get that number and they say, okay, our sticker price is 60,000. This family's SAI is 40. So this family has $20,000 of need. If your SAI is 100,000 and the school costs 80 minus 100, you don't have any financial needs. Doesn't mean you're going to pay 100,000. It just means those need-based grants we talked about, you're not going to be eligible for. And it's not across the board the same. It totally depends on the cost of college for obvious reasons. So that's the need-based aid. So the next question you should be asking, and you probably are thinking, all right, Peg, so what's an SAI and what's part of it? And this leads to a question that was already in there. And I said I was going to answer it live. So the person that asked about 529s, perk up because I'm going to answer that right now. So the assets are in this calculation are non-retirement assets. So if you have a 403B, a 401k, Roth, traditional IRAs, those are all retirement accounts, a pension. Those are retirement. So that's not part of the calculation. That's a big mistake that gets made on financial aid forms. Parents include that because they don't realize. So, but anything else is on the table. So somebody already very smartly asked about a 529 account. So as a parent, if you're the owner of the 529, which is very typical, and your child is the beneficiary, that's an asset of yours. That's another big mistake people make, and it's very logical. Well, I'm saving for my child for college, so of course that's an asset of theirs. It is not going to bore you with all the details, but the way the IRS has it, it's your money. You can always pull it back. It's not a gift. So that should be part of the question on the forms is net worth of investment. So the 529s that you own as a parent go there. If grandma and grandpa own a 529, that shows up nowhere on these forms. And if you're divorced and your ex, who's not going to be reporting on the FAFSA, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, they own that 529, that is not on the form either. So it's only the people submitting the FAFSA that are owners of the 529. Real estate is included except for your primary home on the main federal form called the FAFSA, which we'll talk about in a minute. So the home you live in is off the table, but there's a group of about 200, mostly private schools, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, that do ask about what we call your primary home, the home you live in. So you want to remember, they're going to look at your equity, which is the market value minus any liens you have, your main mortgage, or if you have a home equity line of credit. So you want to take that difference, and that's your equity, but you don't want to overvalue your home. You want to be honest, lowest defensible, I got to sell my home yesterday value, and then you can always take off to up about 20%, because as we all know, people that have sold homes, you're not walking away with all that money, right? So that's totally fine to do that, and they're going to look at that as an asset, and Matt's going to show in a few minutes that can vary from school to school how they look at it. And then we've got a bullet here. People always say, what about I have credit card debt, or I have student loans, or I have car debt, whatever that is. They don't ask about it, but you definitely are going to share. And that's another step of the process when you're appealing, which we'll touch on for 2 seconds at the end. Matt will just kind of tease it. So that's the asset piece, and assets are actually assessed. If you want to be that meticulous, the day you hit submit, you can look at your portfolio. Anything that's non-retirement, and if the market has at a downturn for a few days, you might want to look at it, and then you'll be putting a lower value on the financial aid forms. So
Peg,
what?
a couple related questions here that I think are repeat and related questions that are worth touching on. One of them is what, and sorry if you already said this while I was answering questions, in terms of like, is there a look back period? One of the one ways it was stated was, is it legal to move assets from one place to another before we submit the form? So can you please talk about the timing? And then the other one was, does it matter? What are our options if they're going to look at money that's in the student's name with more emphasis than they will in the parent's name in a savings account? Kind of what are our options? So somewhat related there if you want to talk to those.
Yeah, sure. So the timing is, and I just said this, but I can repeat it and just make it, because I know why you have that question as a parent. It's literally the day you hit submit. So yes, if you have some money, you want to redo your counters in your kitchen, go spend that money, you're buying a new car, whatever it is, or if you have some strategies about putting money here or there, you have up until the day you hit submit. And I'll hit income, not so much. It's the flip side. But the other question is, if your child has, usually kids don't have a significant amount of money in their name, but say they've been working and they've got $10,000 in their name. Well, that's going to be assessed at 50%. So what you can do is move that money to your name, not because you're taking it, just, hey, we're going to put it there. It's your money. We know it's your money. We're not, it's your beer and pizza money or whatever you've decided as a family. But then that gets assessed at up to 5.64%. So it's better if you have need-based eligibility. If you don't bother. You probably have many other things to do with your day. So that's where the planning part and understanding your family, there's no straight, I wouldn't say everybody should move the money out of their kids' name, because some of you, it might not move the needle at all, might not help you, but you can. And that's the easiest thing to do if your child has, sitting on a checking account or something that's only in their name. So good questions. So when it comes to the income, and this is what I think this parent was getting at, is income is assessed in what we call prior year. So it's a 2-year look back. So whatever year your child is going to school, even if they're an upperclassman, you take when they're starting in the fall, subtract 2, that's the tax year. So if you have a child that just started senior year, you're going to be asked about tax year 2022, as it says on the slide. And then each year, it'll be 2022 through 2025 if you have a senior in high school right now. So keep that in mind. You can't do anything about 2022, and I know we'll get these questions and they're good. If your current reality, or even, your current reality is worse, like something happened, somebody lost a job, somebody's disabled, whatever it is, you're still going to submit those forms the way you should for 2022, but you will be reaching out on appeal. And Matt's going to touch on that later. That's a whole webinar in and of itself, but don't be stressed that like, wow, it's different now. My wife's only working part-time and a lot of income's gone. You definitely want to let the school know about those kind of changes. As it says on the slide here, student income, on the federal form, they can make over $9,400. So it usually doesn't move the needle for the students, right? Because most kids don't make more than that. But the parent income is by far the biggest driver. There's a few allowances, but then the highest part of your income, which is a big chunk of it, is assessed at almost 47%. So it's a big part of this SAI calculation. And if you're W-2 steady Eddie, it is what it is, right? But that doesn't mean that you can't plan and you can't get discounts. So stay tuned if that's your family. There's just different strategies. So I'll turn it over to you now, Matt, to talk through it. You want me to go to the next slide, or you want to touch on this here a little?
Sure. I mean, just really quickly, so merit-based financial aid, which Peg mentioned in passing here, we want to focus on that for a little bit here. And it's different in the sense that need-based financial aid, and really the last 20 or so minutes that Peg was talking, a little bit more complex. There's more layers, but it really has to do with your family's financial situation, how generous or not a college is. And you're doing that with the financial aid office, whereas merit-based scholarships, merit-based aid is really just not about, it has little to nothing to do with your financial situation, has everything to do with your student, the particular school, and we're dealing with the admissions office. And the other piece here that I think is noteworthy is that usually if you get a merit-based scholarship, we can set our watch to that for 4 years, usually, right? That's not 100% of the time. And usually the student has to maintain a minimum GPA, whereas need-based financial aid, we have to reapply for financial aid every year. We have to do the FAFSA and CSS profile every year. And if income goes up and down, then we should expect that need-based aid goes up and down proportionately, whereas that's not the case with merit. And you can go to the next slide, Peg. And Peg, I saw that you put this in the chat. I did as well. Just everybody, just a reminder, and I'm sure some folks showed up a couple minutes after we gave kind of our housekeeping announcements in the beginning. Please put all your questions in the Q&A. That maximizes your odds that we can get to them. Thank you. So again, merit-based aid, I just flagged what it was, but there's a couple things I want to talk through before we actually go through some case studies here. And again, a couple bullet points that I think are not necessarily obvious to everybody. But the first thing that we want to figure out for everybody, regardless of your need-based eligibility, is, well, where's my kid going to get scholarships, right? And how much can we expect them to get? And one of the I think myths that we find is that a lot of people, and this is harder to get a gauge of when we're doing this virtually, but when I would do this live, and we still do it live sometimes, I see half the room kind of tune out for this merit-based scholarship section. And I think those are the parents that say, well, my kid's in the middle of the class, they're not super motivated, they don't test well, they're kind of an average student, they're not getting merit-based scholarships. Okay. I promise you, I don't care who you are, who your student is, I can show you some schools that are going to give your kids merit-based scholarships. There is a certain percentage of colleges that give merit-based scholarships to 100% of students that are accepted, right? So it's just a matter of finding what are those schools and aligning those with schools, obviously, that are going to be good fits for your kids. So we'll show you how to do that within the platform in a minute here. A couple other things before we do. Number one, some of you, and we've already got questions along these lines, are thinking or have confirmed, I'm not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid. Therefore, I don't need to do the FAFSA or the CSS profile. Okay. Now, there are a certain percentage of colleges that in order to be considered for merit-based scholarships, you have to do the FAFSA. You have to do the CSS profile, regardless of your aid eligibility. So that's really, really important. And again, is not necessarily common knowledge. NYU is an example that we use, one of the most popular schools in the world, right? That do give some scholarships if you have an exceptional student, but you have to do the financial aid applications to even throw your hat in the ring. Another thing that we find is that that again is not necessarily common knowledge. Not every school gives scholarships, and there's now about 100 schools in the country where scholarships don't exist. Okay, it doesn't matter how brilliant your kid is, it doesn't matter how talented they are athletically, academically, artistically, scholarships don't exist, right? There's not one kid at Harvard or Princeton or MIT that is there on a scholarship. Okay, if you're not paying full sticker price, that means you're getting need-based financial aid. So as you're putting this list of colleges together, it's mission critical that you understand which ones scholarships are even a possibility. Okay, again, especially if you have some of these really bright kids where you might be banking on a scholarship of some sorts. And the last one, Peg teased it, I'll tease it again at the end. We want to apply to competing colleges. Okay, and this is especially important if we're not eligible for need-based aid. And this is kind of an important mentality, an important concept. I think a lot of people, most of us as consumers, as we tackle this process, we don't have our business hats on. We're not thinking about this like a kind of big investment financial transaction, but I promise you the colleges are. Okay, these are nonprofit institutions, but they're really multi-billion-dollar corporations in a lot of ways, multi-billion-dollar corporations for some of them. And we want to approach it with that mindset a little bit, okay, even if it feels unorthodox, because when we do that, and we just like any other major investment, guys, right? If you're going to buy a house, if you're going to buy a new car, you know you're going to be leveraging opportunities against one another. You're going to be negotiating. We want to bring that same exact mindset to this process, and something that we do all the time is that we will recommend specific colleges to the families that we work with, knowing we're never going to attend there. We're never going to go to that school, but we're going to use that school's offer as leverage for our top choice or our top choices. And so that's how I want you thinking, right? And just to give you an example, I always use a couple great engineering schools up in the Northeast, right? There's WPI, Worcester Polytech Institute in Massachusetts, really good engineering school. RPI in Troy, New York. And, a lot of, for whatever reason, a lot of families that we work with will like one and not the other. But we will always make them apply to the other, knowing that we're never going to go up to RPI. We're just going to use that as leverage when we go back to our WPI and vice versa. So really important concept here. And Peg, if I could, what I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll get in the
Yeah, while he's doing that, I'll just add on to what he said about the FAFSA. There's also schools that if you don't apply for financial aid for freshman year, you're out of luck. So COVID happened, people's lives changed overnight. And I used to say, even before COVID, to my families, are you going to roll the dice? Especially if you're a business owner or something, but life can change very quickly. So be very careful before you make a decision not to submit the form.
Yep, great call. I echo that. So this is, I see that a ton of you have already created your MyCap accounts, which is great. So obviously we hopefully done a decent job of showing you from a high level. Well, here's how this whole thing works. From a 30,000 foot view, here's how to need-based financial aid works. Here's how merit-based scholarships work. And that's good. It's important to know, but how is it going to work for you? I can't tell you how many people that I interface with on a daily basis, and I know my team would echo this too, that their intuition doesn't necessarily align with the reality of this. And what I mean is, I talk to so many people that say, I know I'm not going to be eligible for financial aid. I talk to my coworkers, I talk to my neighbors, forget it. And they just whiff. They're wrong on that, or vice versa, right? Like, I'm banking on financial aid and I know I must be eligible, but hey, you live in an area of the country and that our incomes and are generally higher than the rest of the country, and the calculation really doesn't equate for that. They don't care if you live in New York City or the Bay Area, or whatever, the Southern California, these more expensive parts of the country to live in, that also usually means we have higher incomes. So let's take this guesswork out of it and use this platform so you know exactly where you stand. Right away, you're going to answer a few questions. And again, most of you already have, and we're going to say, this is what your SAI is going to be. After you complete the FAFSA and submit it, the federal government is going to say, this is what you can pay per year for college. And then there's the institutional SAI. This is the to further confuse things, okay, there's actually more than one SAI. And a lot of the private schools, specifically that those that require a form called the CSS profile, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here, they have a completely different, not completely different, but a different formula for determining what they think you can pay per year per college, right? And then just because these numbers are what they are, that doesn't mean that's what you're going to pay at each of these schools, because at the end of the day, each of these schools have their own business model and different levels of generosity or lack thereof. Okay. And these are some really good examples here, right? So we can see for this family, first of all, we see a completely different SAI at the institutional level versus the federal level. Why is that? Number one, this family owns their home. They have a mortgage, but they have a meaningful percentage of home equity. Most schools that require the CSS profile consider your home equity fair game to varying degrees, which we'll talk about. This family is also a two-household family. The parents are divorced, okay? Schools that use the federal methodology are only requiring the information from one household, and we'll talk about who that is, whereas most schools that use the institutional methodology require it from both households, okay? So that's why you see a higher number here. In a lot of ways, I'm telling you more than you need to know. I just want you focused on, what are these schools actually going to cost your family, right? As Peg said at the beginning, in so many cases, the sticker price is downright misleading. It has nothing to do with how affordable or not a school is going to be for your family. So you see a great example here where BU, Amherst, NYU, almost identical sticker prices, but we're paying that, we're going to be expected to pay a much different amount at each of these families. Why is that? Well, each of these schools use the institutional methodology. NYU considers all the home equity you have fair game. Amherst, though, they don't look at any of it. They don't. If you own your primary residence, they're not going to hold that against you. Whereas BU is somewhere in the middle. Again, we're getting a little bit further in the weeds here than we need to, but I'm just educating you on the fact of how every business, every college is a little bit different, and let this platform take the guesswork out of it for you guys. Okay. And there's always to me, this is a Boston area family. I think this is a really powerful example, and it's not a weird one. Believe it or not, this is way more common than you would expect, where the Amherst College, the almost $90,000 college, is going to be more affordable than the in-state state school at UMass, based on this family situation and based on how these colleges do business. So let's just take a minute here, put in the chat, throw out a couple of specific colleges that you guys are curious about, that you're applying to, or you're thinking about applying to, and we'll put them in here and just take a look. And we can see again how kind of generous or not these guys are. So one of them I saw was Syracuse. Okay. So if we look at Syracuse College, let's see how we're going to do. Pretty stinking expensive, Syracuse now. So 83,000, we're going to get some discount here. Now, for any college you put in there, if you click on the school, we can get a little more context as to the why. Okay. So we see the sticker price. Well, we're going to be getting a $35,000 in need-based grants here to bring us to our expected net price for year one. And just to, again, give you a little tour in terms of what you have access to. For every college in the country, we have every single scholarship that they offer, the qualifications for each, and we're really good at projecting, well, how much is your kid going to get, if anything, at this particular school? And then again, if you want to go further in the weeds and say, well, why am I getting $35,000 worth of need-based aid? Well, we're going to tell you, here's the methodology they use for determining aid. They use the institutional methodology. So they're looking at home equity, and they meet a very high percentage of need if we demonstrate any, right? So I think that can be pretty helpful, in my opinion here. And let me just look at one more school. Okay, let's look at Virginia Tech. Go Hokies. A little bit of a heartbreaker on okay, that's right. Okay, there we go. There's Virginia. Okay. So you see here, even though this is a really smart kid, okay, Virginia Tech's going to give they're likely going to be eligible for a small merit-based scholarship, and that is just because Virginia Tech now, they're not great with need-based financial aid. And again, you guys can dig in here to see the details as to why. And they're also, it's hard to get a scholarship there. It's hard to get in there, right? And on that front, on the admissions front, for every school, we tell you the average GPA, the average test scores, percentage-wise, how many students usually receive a scholarship. But again, we're tailor-making projections for your family here. And another thing that I want to show you, this advanced school search, before I pass it back to Peg here. This is the idea where you can figure out, you can put in a few admissions filters, right? You can say, well, I know my kid wants to be close to home, and maybe they prefer smaller schools, and they're thinking about majoring in whatever they're thinking about. And then you can just go sort based on financial criteria. So go show me schools that check those boxes, but are also going to give me merit-based scholarships, right? And maybe Wheaton College wasn't on your list, but geez, they're going to give us 40 grand. Let's take a look. Or if I just want to sort based on who's most generous with need-based financial aid, I can do that. So because that's how we want to be thinking, right? Obviously, what's front of mind for us initially is what's going to be the best fit for our kids, where they're going to be most comfortable, where they're likely to get in. But in that same breath, we also want to be thinking, what is the affordability factor going to be for our family, right? That's the needle that ultimately we're trying to thread with every family that we work with here.
Yeah, and it's just, you're basically really shopping with affordability in mind, which is pretty powerful. Helps to avoid some of that stress down the road, trust me. So, okay. All right, so let's keep going here, because we had a lot of great questions about the forms. Mm-hmm. So let's kick into this. So let's talk through. So there's two different financial aid forms. The first one is called the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. This form is going live sometime in December of this year. This is a one-off anomaly. The Congress passed at the end of 2020 the FAFSA Simplification Act. So there's a bunch of changes that went into that student aid index. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Matt's going to touch on that. They are still getting their ducks in a row so that everything's dialed in. So that will go live. We still don't know. We're hoping it's close to December 1, but the Department of Ed hasn't released that date yet. The minute we know, we'll let you know. We'll let our CAP community know. Normally it goes live October 1st. So next year, it'll go live October 1st. So if you have a class of 2025 child, you'll be October 1st. If you have a senior in high school right now, you're going to be waiting until sometime in December to submit the FAFSA. As I said earlier, it's prior year, so it's all going to be about 2022. A lot of people have written in and said, this has changed, that has changed. Should I be appealing? I wrote back to one person, big time, because their 2023 income is much lower. So that's when you want to be appealing, and stay tuned. We do that all spring. We can help you. As far as who submits the FAFSA, if you are divorced or separated, and separated means you're living in different households, only the custodial parent submits the FAFSA. And the definition of custodial parent has changed with this new legislation. It's the parent that provides the most financial support. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's the parent that's paying child support. It could be. If the parent that's paying child support, it's a sizable amount, and that's paying for over half of the support for the student. But we strongly encourage you to take some time and sit down and think about each parent and what they provide. And if it's close, a lot of families have said to me, well, Peg, we're 50-50. Well, that's great, because the parent that has lower income and lower assets is the parent you want to submit the FAFSA, because then you're going to be eligible for more aid, and you can go into your MyCap account and put that in your profile and actually get projections, right? So you want to sit down and look at that and say, okay, you're paying child support. The child spends 85% of the time with me. I have a mortgage. There's 3 of us in the house. You divide that mortgage, you divide your utilities. You see where I'm going here. You pay for all of elite soccer, whatever it is. Do a spreadsheet, because you might not be 50-50. And if you truly are, pay $100 more for something so that you're being honest, and it's a look back from when you're submitting the form, who's provided the most financial support. So Congress changed it, but there's still a lot of gray area there while still being honest submitting the form. So that's how that works. Only one parent submits, because there are a few questions in there about that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. If you have a senior, you're going to want to get what's called a federal student aid ID. You have to get one as the parent. If you're married, one parent, or honestly, we recommend both parents get it. The URL is right there. It's pretty quick process. Make sure you're on the right page, because you're going to be giving your social security number, your date of birth, creating security questions. They're checking that you are who you are, so that you can submit this form and electronically sign it. The student absolutely, your child absolutely needs one. And even if you're married, we recommend both parents just get it. We'll get into the details of how you're specifically going to do this when we do our line by line webinar, because it's a little different than in previous years. But go ahead and get that done now. Put it in your password sheet. You're going to need this every year when you submit the FAFSA. So don't lose it. Okay. So that's what you can do right now. Otherwise, you got to hold tight, right? If the school only requires the FAFSA, which is most schools, you're going to have to wait until it goes live. It just is what it is. Okay. Here's a few kind of tips and tricks. We've hit a couple of these. I've already mentioned number 1, retirement accounts don't go on. Home equity in your primary home, none of that is included. Talked about 529s. Only put in the 529 that the parents own. If you're divorced, only the parent that's submitting should be on there. If they, I can't remember on the demo if they ask, there's always been a question, do you want to be considered for work study? If it's still on there, just say yes. Can't hurt you, but it can really help you. Okay. And those are the key things there. Okay. The second form, and I referenced this quickly earlier, it's called the CSS profile. It's administered by College Board. So if your child is taking APs, PSAT, SAT, they have a login, they're familiar with College Board. These schools will require the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So there's some key differences here. First of all, the CSS profile is it's more than triply as long because the FAFSA is shortening with the new changes. So it's much longer and it's much more invasive. But if you don't submit it and you're eligible for need-based aid, that college or university will not give you their endowment money for need-based aid. So you need to know if they require it, and you can get that information in our software, and then make sure you're meeting the deadline, just like for the FAFSA. So what are the key differences here? First one is, and Matt teased this up when he was in the software, your home that you live in, most of these schools will look at your equity in some capacity. Some of them, like a Stanford, or I forget what he had up on his screen, and maybe it was Amherst, they don't look at any of it, which is a game changer if you're sitting on a lot of equity, especially if you don't have high income. That could be a dramatically different SAI. You could have need-based eligibility and maybe not at another school. So keep that in mind. That's all built into our tool. But then there's different tranches of, we look at it 2 times income, 3 times income. There's all different levels, but most of them will look at your home equity. For divorced and separated families, remember how I just said one parent submits the FAFSA? Both parents are going to submit a CSS. That will be the CSS that the custodial parent submits with the child. The non-custodial parent will also submit a separate form. They both go to College Board. Privacy is maintained. The colleges can see all of that data, and then they do their number crunching. So if you're divorced and they're looking at both parents, obviously your SAI is going to be higher. There's a few schools that, even though they require the CSS, they don't look at the custodial parent, but a non-custodial parent, but most of them do. Business owners, and this is true for the FAFSA now, if you're a business owner, the value of your business, the income from your business is going to flow on your tax return and be a part of it, but the value of your business is going to be asked about. So you want to make sure you're not overvaluing your business. Again, you want to be honest, but some business owners can honestly, the business I had before I joined CAP, if I unfortunately got hit by a bus, I don't know that it had a big resale value. There are some businesses that do, but a lot of consulting businesses do not. So 0 might be your answer, and don't feel like you're lying and feel guilty about it. It just depends on the type of business and if you have inventory and such. So that's the CSS profile. Key difference is that is going live October 1st, and insider information typically goes live early. It could be a week before. So you might be able, you remember, you're looking for the 24-25 school year. Don't submit the 23-24 because that year's in progress, right? So you don't jump the gun because you're exuberant about it. And then similar to the FAFSA slide, I've hit a bunch of these, but key takeaways on the CSS, and we are going to do a line by line. So stay tuned for that, where we'll go through these forms. But if it does not say required, you don't need to answer it. It's not required. Don't overvalue your home. I already hit on that. We talked about 529s. And there is a question on the CSS that asks how much you can pay. Be very careful not to overestimate. You never want to put a number that's higher than your SAI. So that's a strategy call depending on the family and your situation. And then last thing of all of these I want to hit on is special circumstances. There's a place where you can write some information about your family, leave it blank. You want to present that to the colleges later on an appeal, you have more leverage. If you fill that in and you reach out and say, hey, but I told you, one person wrote in and said, I'm supporting both of my grandparents and this and that and the other thing. They can say, yeah, we took that into account. You have more leverage if you can come back with them to the college after you got the package. So that's just high level. So I am going to kick it back to Matt here. He's going to talk about the FAFSA changes that I referenced.
Yeah, and some of this is going to be a little bit of a repeat, but I think it bears worth repeating here, especially for you class 2024 families and below, right? 25 and 26 too, but specifically class 2024, you all are the guinea pigs, right? And these are some of the biggest changes in decades. Some of them are good, and we're going to start there. Some of them are not good. And with that, I almost want to spend kind of more time going over that, because it's just really important that you understand this, because it's going to have huge swings on how much these colleges are actually going to end up costing folks that are impacted by some of these. And it's going to be a lot of people. Okay, let's start with the good news. I'll skip down to bullet point number 5 here. There's going to be more help for families that need it the most. right? Universally, we're psyched about that, right? I mean, I don't think anybody looks at that and thinks it's a bad thing, right? Families that need the most help are getting more help. It's going to be easier in theory to navigate this process. So for folks that have a hard time just getting through the applications themselves, or maybe some students that don't have help at home, they're going to have the ability to get what they should get. The requirements for who can be eligible for these are becoming a little bit easier, and again, the dollar amount. So everybody's happy with that. The problem is, it's not coming from our federal government. It's not coming from the Department of Education. It's not coming from the colleges. It's other families that are going to help fund this program. And I'll talk about who that is in a minute here, because it's really the first 4 bullet points. And then the other one is families who receive outside financial help. So grandparents that have 529s would be kind of the probably best example there. You're not going to be punished, for lack of a better word. It's not going to hurt your need-based financial aid eligibility. There's untaxed income used to, and child support used to be things that really hurt financial aid eligibility. That stuff is going away. So there's some positives in there, right? And number 5 being the highlight. But it's these first 4 bullets that are really going to get negatively impacted, I think, especially if we don't do this the right way, right? Especially if we're not really smart about how we navigate this process. So one of them, again, Peg talked about it. I've been talking about it a whole bunch in the chat and the Q&A here. 2 household families, divorced and separated families. Who should be completing the FAFSA? Again, like Peg said, the parent that provides the most financial support. Be smart here, guys. Be strategic. See to it that the parent that provides the most financial support is the one with the least income, the lowest assets, the one that's going to give you the lowest SAI, and therefore the most need-based financial aid eligibility. Be smart here, okay? Think outside the box. Just because you're receiving child support, maybe you're paying the mortgage, maybe you're giving the spending money every time that comes up, you're paying for the clubs, et cetera, et cetera. Be smart. Use this rule change to your advantage. Make it a win. This second one is harder to make a win. It's harder to control outside of where we decide to apply to college, because the rule always used to be what I think it should be. And that is, if you have more than 1 kid in college, the formula accounts for that. And basically they say you still have the same income, you still have the same resources, but now you got 2 kids in school and we're going to take that into account. That's going away. Okay. And what that effectively means, if we boil it down in its simplest layman's terms, is that if you have more than 1 kid in college at once, essentially the cost of college just doubled for you guys with this rule change. Okay. That's not universal. It's not at every school, but it's going to be at every school that uses the federal methodology, which is the vast majority of colleges. So it's hard to put a silver lining on that rule change, to be quite frank with you, but it's important that you know that it's there, especially if you have 1 kid in college and maybe the rug gets pulled out from underneath you next year. And I'll talk about, again, kind of what we can do to potentially respond to that in a second. And that kind of takes care of items 2 and 3 here. The last one, business owners, right? And again, Peg mentioned this. It used to be if you have less than 100 employees, you don't count your business on the FAFSA, okay? You don't put anything there. That's gone now. Even if you're a sole proprietor now, they want you to report the net worth, the assets of your business. And again, this is one of these gray areas, and I think something that we do very well is helping families take advantage of the gray areas, because I know this is where people are going to screw themselves. They're just going to put the gross numbers of their business. They're not going to be thinking about depreciation, what it might be if they actually liquidated their business, and the taxes and what they would actually put in their pocket. They're going to overvalue. They're not going to consider liabilities. And how I'm coaching this to families, obviously it varies with each individual, but, and Peg said this, don't be afraid to put 0. For so many of you, your business is worth nothing if you don't show up to work tomorrow, right? And don't be afraid at a minimum to hugely be pessimistic with this and welcome a conversation and a back and forth with these colleges. Because I'm just really, really concerned with this rule, because I just know so many people are going to accidentally screw themselves, specifically business owners, out of financial aid here. So those are the big ones, guys, but these are where we're busier than we've ever been, making sure that families don't make the mistakes that are even easier to make this year. So
Let
I'm
me
gonna
just interrupt you before you do the little appeals
sure.
tease, but people have asked, and I didn't mention this, so that's my bad. If you are remarried and the FAFSA, it's the household income. So both of you, it's all of it. And it doesn't matter if your new spouse didn't adopt or you have a prenup or anything. It's everybody in the household. So if you're remarried, it's the custodial parent plus the new spouse. So just I had a bunch of questions about that. So sorry to interrupt.
Same, right? And again, that's the deal on the FAFSA, but CSS profile schools are not supposed to count step parent income and assets. I put quotes there because they usually do. And this is how we fight it, via appealing, right? So appealing, ultimately, what are we talking about here, guys? We're talking about negotiating. We can't use that word because financial aid counselors really, it's a real turnoff to them. But that in kind of layman's terms, that's what we're doing here. But that nomenclature does matter. And the takeaway here, we're not going to get into unpacking this. Peg and I do entire presentations for months talking about this specific thing here. But the takeaway is, going back to kind of my mentality here of this being a little bit of a business transaction, we want to go into this going, I'm not going to take the first offer, just like I wouldn't on a house, on a car, etc. I want to go back and squeeze a couple more bucks out of these colleges. And there's an absolute method to the madness, and it is a sophisticated process, but it is something that you need to know at least exists. And again, it's just important. And it all starts with that mentality, because we got a ton of questions around, well, my income changed. There was a divorce or separation since 2022. There was a job loss, any number of things. It all comes down to this appeal part of the process, right? And this is going to be huge this year when we get into fighting what we think business valuations are and all these new rule changes here. So that's all the time I'll spend on it for today's purposes, though, Peg, I think. Okay. So a couple things here, and again, we got a ton of questions, something along the lines of, some of them are just really specific questions. What about my trusts? What about my LLCs? How do I respond to this business? We each have 50-50 of the kid. Who should be the one that should complete the FAFSA? Basically, some things we need more help beyond what you guys are just offering to us today. So I want to talk through what that looks like, and Peg can share this. Link to put in the chat here, but there's basically kind of 3 buckets that we put people into, or in some ways maybe even 2 buckets, and you all can self-identify, right? These first 2 are what I consider to be just kind of DIYers, right? If you're someone that's like, hey, look, I'm all over this thing, but I just want to make sure I have all the tools possible at my disposal. What I would recommend is and this is for today only, guys. And so we have a great partnership with NSHSS. So you have some really unique discounts. And again, we don't discount beyond this, what you're seeing on the screen right here. This is as deep as we will discount anything. And that's 20%, but you just got to engage with us today. There's a little bit of urgency here where you got to opt in by 12 o'clock Eastern time tonight, by midnight Eastern time. And a lot of you said, hey, I can't put more than three schools into the platform. I can't use that advanced search where I can sort just based on who's going to give me the most financial aid, the most scholarships. If you want to upgrade to the full version of our kind of DIY platform, you can do that, right? Our retail price is $149, but if you use this coupon code NSH20 by the end of the day today, you upgrade to that for $120. You'll have access to that for a year. You can put in unlimited colleges. Again, it does a whole lot more than just what we showed you if you've started to fool around in there. But that is something that I think is a no-brainer investment. But what I would encourage you to do, again, if you're in this DIY camp, upgrade to the premium plus expert package, because here's what happens there. You get the access to the platform for a whole year. Okay, but you also get an hour with one of our experts. It could be me, it could be Peg. I got a lot of veteran questions, right, about GI Bill, about VA benefits. Help me with his last name. Is it Hindenburg?
Mike Hunsberger is our expert. He's a vet, and he's our expert.
So that's the
Unheard
guy
of.
where
Yep.
you would say those veteran questions, book an hour, right? You get the platform plus an hour, and you can use this hour anytime over the next year, guys. So even if you're like, I don't need help today, maybe you want someone to review your FAFSA, review your CSS profile, help you with your appeal. You're right. Double check your list to make sure you have enough safeties, whatever it is. But book that today, and then you can book the hour at any time. You can meet with the director of financial aid at Harvard, at MIT, director of scholarships at University of Oklahoma, former director of financial aid, JP Schmidt at the University of Southern California, right, at USC. These are the top experts you're going to find in the world. I promise you, in the world. I know that in my gut. So if you are a DIYer, do one of those packages. Don't overthink it, right? I know the last thing you want to think about right now is like, holy shit, I just looked at those prices. They're $90,000 for college. I do not want to spend money right now. This is an investment, and you will get a return on this investment. Like, I think for most of you, in my experience working with NSHSS families, just about all your kids are brilliant. You got hardworking kids that have done their part. I know this is self-serving, right? But don't spare expenses for this, right? Do your part as parents, invest in them to make sure we're getting this part right. Okay. Work with us to help you here, right? We will help you. Okay. And for those of you that say, hey, we have this package we call Wake Me Up When It's Over, right? Obviously a completely different price point. But these are for families where you're just like, you know what? I don't have time for this. Our situation is too complicated. I don't want to screw this up. This is where you work with us, one of our experts, one-on-one, unlimited amount of time through the entire process, specifically on the financial aid front, right? So what does this mean exactly? Okay. We're going to help you put this list of colleges together. We're going to tell you, well, what schools compete with one another. Okay.
Yeah, people were asking that in the
Like
Q&A.
who's going to give us the most bang for our buck? Okay. Do we have enough safety versus reach, etc.? Okay. We're going to complete the financial aid forms for you guys. We do the FAFSA. We do the CSS profile. You're divorced or separated. We do both CSS profiles because you're each going to have to do a separate one. We're going to tell you how to value the business. We're going to tell you which parent should complete the FAFSA. Okay. We're going to tell you which ones are not going to look at home equity, right? Which ones do look at home equity. So I compare this part of the process, right, is like having a great CPA. It's not just about completing the forms. It's how do we do it in such a way we qualify for the maximum deductions, right? And this way you don't have to worry about deadlines, who needs what, when do they need it. We completely manage that part of the process. And then we're on the front lines for appeals. We get an offer from a college, right? Guess what? We get to tap our whole team of experts and say, hey, Brian, we got this offer at Harvard. How do we go back and do better? JP, we just got this offer from USC. How should we go back to your colleagues and do better than this initial offer? Having this insider intel has very proven results. And there's, as a matter of fact, some people on this call that can tell you that have worked with us. And then finally, it's paying the bill, right? The last part of this process is, okay, we know where we're going. We know what it's going to cost. How should we pay this over 4 years, right? All 4 years for multiple kids for a lot of you, right? So if we have resources, do we use the 529 first, grandparent contributions? What should we be thinking about tax-wise? If we need to borrow, what loan should our family take, right? So again, I understand this is a really big investment. I'm putting it in the chat here because I got some questions. But guys, here's a couple of things here. Our roster is almost full for this, and you're not going to get it at a lower price. So we go up in price October 1st. We have our seasonal prices each year, and it's a $500 discount if you book it today. And here's what I'll tell you, because I understand for a lot of you, you've just met us for the first time. You've only known us for an hour, and we're asking you to come up with whatever it is. What is it? After the discount, $32.49. It's a huge amount of money. Buy it today at the discount. And then if you're like, you know what, I want a sanity check. I want to have a gut check call with somebody. I want to talk to one of the experts that I'm going to be working with. We'll arrange that for you. So get in there tonight at the price so we can lock that in, and then just write into support. You write into support at collegeaidpro.com. You say, I bought the full service, Wake Me Up When It's Over package, but I want to gut check it. Okay. And then you can talk to one of us. And if you feel like, you know what, I'm not as confident that these guys are going to deliver on the promise, we'll give you a full refund. No questions asked. But at least that way you can lock in the price. I feel confident. You'll feel really good that it's a good investment. And it is. It is, guys. I mean, this is, again, we don't want to think about spending money now, but when we look at $90,000 a year, it's a smart investment, and we'll back it up.
I just put that email in the chat as well. And
Okay.
then there's so many questions here that we're just not going to get to. There's 99 plus still in there. We're just not going to get to all of them, but a lot of people with divorce questions, that's a perfect, if the Wake Me When It's Over is landing for you, that's a perfect package for that. If that's too much, you can book a couple hours, right? Just let us help you. It's a lot, there's no way we can answer everybody's questions. And honestly, some of your questions we can't answer without knowing you, right? Because it's very family specific. You're all unique in your different situations.
Yeah, and in terms of the these prices are not per month, guys, right? These are one-time deals, right? So
yeah, I answered that in the chat, but yeah.
Okay, our Wake Me Up When It's Over package is from whenever you hire us. So if you're a sophomore, junior, whatever, until your kid moves into the dorm, right? And obviously, if you're a senior, it's from now until call it a year from now. The other packages are you're locked in for a year, and then after that, it's $4.99 or $5 a month, right? And you cancel at any time at whatever after that, right?
And the hours, you're booking an hour. And as Matt said earlier, there's no expiration. So you can just capture the discount and then get used to your MyCap account, get your questions, and then book your hour. It's super easy. You just click talk to an expert. You get everybody's names. Matt already threw out some names. We've just got great people. We've got a guy, Dan Maga, who he's been doing this stuff for years in Illinois and knows it inside and out. We've deliberately built a really, really good team of experts that can help you with any scenario that you have.
And we get to leverage us, right? That's a huge advantage we have. Whoever you're working with, they're supported by a bigger team, kind of behind the scenes here. And one more thing I want to show you is that, again, the reason why we have to create a lot of urgency here, guys, is because our roster is just about full, specifically for the Wake Me Up When It's Over packages, right? If you go onto our website, you will see that we offer other packages, right? Admissions and combo packages. These are sold out. These are done for the season, right? You can't get these even if you want to. We will be done for the season pretty soon with our financial aid Wake Me Up When It's Over package. I just want to highlight that just to show you, because obviously each of our experts can only work with so many families to be able to deliver on our promises, and we hold ourselves to a really high standard there. So again, I don't like that feeling of you got to buy today type of deal as a consumer. But in some ways we don't have a choice because our roster is full. So we kind of have to create that urgency for people that know this is something they want. Don't overthink it. Jump in and get in today. And then again, you can always gut check it tomorrow if you want to do that and you don't know if you're exactly ready to get started. All right. I think we the renewal price for any of those smaller DIY packages for just the website, guys, after that 1 year, it's $4.99 a month, $5 a month, $4.99 a month. Cancel at any time. Okay. Yeah. And for you 2025 families, get started now. Absolutely get started now. Getting a lot of those questions. So I'll just kind of hit
Here's
on
a twins question that we always get. I know we've tweaked that with twins, right? Is it
so twins for our financial aid packages are an additional $500. So you would add, so the second child is deeply discounted, but it's an additional $500. So what you would do,
I thought it was 500 off. Okay.
So what you would do is you would sign up for today and then let us know your twins, and we'd send you an invoice for the additional $500 as we got you onboarded. Yep.
All right, we're 4 minutes over.
All right, Peggy. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, maybe I'm gonna go catch a flight. Maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah, fingers
but
crossed.
Thanks, everybody. It's great to meet everybody that is on. At a minimum, guys, and this is Peggy's theme, but I'll steal it and then she can reiterate, just stay engaged with us, right? Even if you don't invest in something today, which again, I feel strongly that you should, pay attention. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Keep the ball rolling. Don't put it on a stack and forget about it, because it'll rear its ugly head and It'll be a lot more expensive and a lot more stressful. So hopefully this was helpful. It looks like a lot of thank yous. So appreciate that. Always appreciate that. And everybody have a great week and we will see you next time.